The views and content expressed on the following program are provided solely for informational and entertainment purposes. They do not constitute legal advice. A podcast is not a substitute for retaining a competent, licensed attorney to advise you on your specific legal situation.
Break the business, play is work and work is play. Power into creators, have fun along the way. Break the business, doing what it takes. Celebrate success and learn from the mistakes.
How's it going, everybody? Welcome to the show. It is time for Break the Business, where we empower indie creators and have some fun along the way. I'm Ryan Kairalla, and it is a pleasure to have you here this week. We are in a different setting this week, viewers and listeners. I am in Las Vegas this week with some clients, and so I'm not in my normal studio, but I honestly don't find it to be that much of a drag. I have come to find that historically, when I podcast from hotel rooms, it's an underrated experience. I mean, hotels always have amazing acoustics. And I think it's because, 90% of the walls and floors are covered in like carpet and other kind of fabric material, because you have like the big soft drapes, you have the padded walls, you have the carpeted floors. And so it's like being in a little recording studio. You get pretty good acoustics in a place like this, probably even better than I have in the home studio. And so, yeah, I'm feeling just fine. I'm excited to be in Vegas. I'm hoping not to lose too much money while I am here. I'm trying to be diligent about that. Last time I was in Vegas, I played some poker and I managed to turn like $200 into $500 and then somehow turned it back into $17. And that kind of messed me up on gambling for a while. We'll see how things go this time around. But for now, I'm in high spirits, mainly because of this amazing show that we have coming up. We're going to be joined in the second segment by Tim Walther. He is the founder of All Good Presents. They are bringing back the All Good Music Festival. And for those of you who are fans of jam bands and jam band festivals, the phrase all good definitely means something to you, and you've got to be pretty excited about it. And so the fact that he's bringing it back, it was a big time festival about 20 years ago or so, is a pretty cool thing. Excited to talk to him about it, get his perspective on it, and maybe get some advice from him about setting up your own concerts, getting into the concert side of business, the promotion side of the business. Lots of great insights that he is surely going to share. That's going to be a blast. In the meantime, let's go ahead and bring out our co-host, because I got some things to talk with him about. Musician, investor, and member of Gideon King and City Blog, Gideon King is here. Hi, Gideon.
Howdy. How you doing? How's Vegas?
Vegas is good. It is a little weird doing the Break the Business podcast at 6 p.m, but I'm adjusting. I'm hanging in there. And again, I love hotel podcasting. I mean, I've actually had musician clients who've told me that they will lay down tracks in hotel rooms. They love doing it because like they'll do vocals in a hotel room because the acoustics are so naturally good with all like the carpeting and stuff.
It's true. I always bring it whenever I go to a hotel. I bring my guitar, and there's like this natural dampening effect because of all the cheesy carpets and blinds and stuff, and so it's like you get a very pure kind of not interfered with sound in hotel rooms. But I'm not sure I believe that you're actually. I feel like nobody knows where you are, and you're in Vegas, like, I don't know, doing a gigantic drug deal, and your family doesn't know, and this is the beginning of like a huge bender that you're on. That's what I think's going on, but I don't want to start trouble.
This is gonna be like a Nicolas Cage leaving Las Vegas thing.
It is, man.
I mean, that does sound a lot more fun than what I am doing here, but maybe we'll carve out some time for that. It's always good to carve out some personal time on a business trip. You're absolutely right, Gideon King. Got a lot of cool topics to chat with you about, my friend, before we bring in Tim Walther in the second segment. Excited just to get his perspective on a lot of things and to have you speak with him as well, because I know you two share a lot of common history. He's a live music concert promoter. You've obviously performed a lot of live music as a musician, and as an investor and a businessman, you've done a lot in the festival side of the business. Do you think that this interview is going to kind of bring up some memories for you, positive ones, negative ones?
Man, I'd love to talk to him because, you know what? I've owned some festivals, and they're really, really cool. But they're not easy to make money from. And it's like there's always something. Like we did this one festival, And it was like, our first year, and all these crazy expenses came in. The town wanted snipers on the roof and a certain level of security, and that was another expense. And then the artists' demands came in way more expensive than any of us thought. And so it's like festivals are a series of surprises. So if you can get good at running the festival business and coming out with your skin, then I want to talk to you. And if you can make it a fun festival that everybody enjoys and somehow have enough money to do it the next year, then I definitely want to talk to you.
I'm starting to think my first question should just be how. How do you do what you do? And it sounds like you have the same perspective on that, because I don't have as much experience in the festival business as you do, Gideon, but I've represented some clients who've done smaller versions of festivals, 1-2 day festivals, things like that. And when I did the festivals, I admittedly did them on easy mode, in as much as the festivals weren't ticketed events. They were done with heavy cooperation from a municipality. So we didn't have to charge tickets. Most of our funding came in through external sponsors. So the financial side was a lot easier to manage. And we work with experienced people. But all I could think the whole time was, I don't know how you make the numbers work doing a conventional festival. It just seems like there's way too many costs. It's way too hard to get the revenue in, and the liability, my goodness.
I mean, we'll talk to Tim about it. One of the problems that I had was that we were walking this tightrope between understanding or sort of projecting whether the people are going to come because of the gimmick of the festival itself, elements of the festival that almost had nothing to do with music, or whether they were going to come for the talent. And if they come for the talent, often you need big names, and big names want to get paid a lot. And so I think there's, like, at least in the festivals that I've been involved with, there's like this real tension between needing the talent and the cost of the talent. And you can kind of blow your wad on paying too much for the talent and overrating how important the talent is. So there's like I think there's like a magic dark art to running a festival correctly. And it's, listen, I've done a lot of different things in business. I've had some successes, but I would say that I have generally failed at the festival business. Now, when I play at festivals, I always have a blast. It's super fun. It's like a built-in audience in some ways, and I've had a great experience playing at festivals. But actually investing in building them, now, of course, the 2 festivals that I invested in were literally right before COVID started. So it's not a great thing when you start a festival and then a pandemic shows up, which prevents people from going outside. That tends to be a damper on the festival vibe. I don't know. You don't need to be a business analyst from Harvard to figure that dynamic out.
That is an interesting component of all this, in that the same problems that live music in general is facing post-COVID, and how people are just a lot more reluctant to leave the house now to spend money on concerts, to just feel less safe. They're more accustomed to staying at home. Those same concerns have to be multiplied when you talk about a music festival, which tends to be a bigger investment, a larger gathering of people, which can make people nervous. As hard as it, the festival I did like yours was pre-COVID. And I was thinking back then how hard it is to make the numbers work. Right. In 2025, all bets are off.
Yeah. But you know what? For me, it's still a wonderful romantic thing. So I'm always looking to invest in festivals, and I will invest more, knowing it's like investing in a movie. Sometimes they work, sometimes they don't, man.
They'll get you. You're saying they're going to get you back in again. It's like the tables in Vegas. You say you're done, but yet you just see those flashing lights, and you're right back into it. Oh, man.
Live music, and I think live music's really important. For a variety of reasons nowadays. But anyway, festivals, man, let's talk to Tim when he's ready.
Well, I mean, I remember before the show, Gideon, you and I had a pretty interesting rap session about just your perspective on concerts in general and how things are changing. You were talking to me about drinking, and you were saying that you were hearing from some of your management colleagues that people aren't drinking as much when they go to concerts.
And, my manager, whose name I'll just sort of leave out, he manages some really big acts, and he's saying it's kind of odd that the bar is empty sometimes at some of these really big, at some concerts. And I've noted it too. And even just when I go out for dinner with people, or I literally go to an actual bar, people are like, "Well, I don't drink." And there's just, that is not how it was when I was like, 19 and going out. There's just like this. Believe me, people are still drinking in this country and drinking around the world for damn sure. But there's a strain, there's this sort of fad almost that's like rejecting drinking, where people are like, not only do I drink less, I don't drink at all, quite literally. And so it's given that that's a big component of economics in event spaces, and which I've owned some, and amusement parks, which I've owned some, like, it'll be interesting to talk to him again about that's a trend that's actually, taking place. But a really positive trend is that I really do think that there's a kind of backlash against, going to see music where there's someone up there just with a laptop. People do want to see bands. I mean, I just played at the Iridium in New York. It was sold out. It was super fun, and people were just super happy to feel the physical, the physics behind music and the physical energy in a room. And so it's nice to have that backlash away from just guy up there with his assistant and a laptop. People want to see big bands. They want to see Tedeschi Trucks. They want to see Government Mule. And listen, I mean, we've been playing shows and people are coming out. So I'm excited that like everything from AI to tracks is not destroying the whole concept of the energy and the thrill and the communal sort of merit, if you will, of live music.
Well, there's certainly there's no better example of that energy and that feeling that live music gives you than in the festival setting. All right. So we got some. I'm just making some quick notes here about some of the things that we can cover in our conversation with Tim Walther, who's been in this game for a long time and has seen it all, and will definitely have some great perspective for us. Before we do that, though, wanted to chat with you about some government news. A lot's kind of been happening with the incoming of a new administration and a new Congress. A lot of stuff that is going to have pretty significant impacts on indie creators. One thing that I wanted to quickly mention that I just saw right before we started getting together here for this show is a new bill that is actually an old bill in a way, because they keep bringing it in consecutive Congresses, but it's back again and could have some interesting tax implications. Have you ever heard of the HITS Act, Gideon?
I think I have, but you better tell me about it before I say anything too dumb.
And you should, and I should tell you about it, in as much as I think that if I were to give this bill a nickname, I would probably call it the Gideon King Act.
Nice.
Because I feel like you could really take advantage of a law like this, because it's made for artists who record music, and it would put a lot more money in your pocket. So what this act does, the HITS Act, currently under tax law, if you record an album and you spend money to make that album, you can't deduct all those costs right away. You have to amortize it over the life of the recording. Usually it's 3 to 4 years. So you spend money on a recording, you can't just deduct all that off your taxes right off the front. You got to spread it out over time, in the way that, like, if you own a rental property and you build a new addition to it, you can't just deduct that right away. But what the HITS Act would do is it would allow artists like you to deduct the entire expense right at the beginning, up to $150,000.
Right.
So pretty big deduction for independent artists. You could see that having a significant benefit for them. And really what it would do is it would line the music industry up with the film industry that already is allowed to make these deductions in the same year.
So I was in the business, interestingly enough, of loaning money against two filmmakers against their tax credits. So if Ryan Kairalla makes his movie in Atlanta, and he wants to go market that film to a film festival, but he doesn't have the money, I would lend him the money against his tax credits, and then I would get the money from the state based upon his tax credits. So really what's happening here, and I'm totally familiar with what you're talking about, what's happening here, like as you just alluded to, is just that music is catching up to the concept of accelerated depreciation or bonus depreciation. And that concept exists in everything from buying a boat to making a film to sort of real estate. Real estate is more amortized over time. But yeah, I mean, that's just like, that's just common sense. And frankly, frankly just catching up to the rest of the world, actually. So it's probably, now I haven't read the legislation. By the time you end up reading any piece of legislation, it's a hideous, corrupt document that's infected with special interest to the point where it's a senseless piece of crap. But the concept, and I'll read it, but the concept makes sense. And frankly, it's kind of like, it's about time type thing.
Yeah, but could definitely see this for artists in your position who do self-finance their records. And, obviously you put a lot of love into your art. So, the music you're making is not just something that, you spent $20 on and mixed in GarageBand. You're putting a lot of love into your album. So this could, and so being able to deduct all of that expense on that year's taxes could really benefit artists in your situation. So that's pretty interesting.
Yeah.
But the one I wanted to talk with you about, which I think is if I were to ask anybody, like, what's the most important, significant thing that's happening right now in government policy involving independent artists, it's going to be TikTok. And I remember you and I probably 9 months ago when we first us being together and we were first reporting the law getting passed by Congress that gave TikTok 9 months to either sell, or I should say ByteDance, the parent company of TikTok, to either sell the TikTok platform or it would be shut down on January 19th, 2025. And it was pretty unclear what TikTok was going to do there, because on one hand, you don't want to shut down the platform, but on the other hand, the idea of being forced to sell your company, isn't great either, because a forced sale is going to obviously significantly depress the sale price of that company. TikTok didn't really have a great position to be in. And it got even worse when the Supreme Court held a few days before the 19th that there was no First Amendment violation in this law. And so the bill could move forward. And so it looked like TikTok was heading for its demise on January 18th. TikTok, I logged into my TikTok platform and got a little note that said, hey, you can't use this anymore. The law says we have to shut down. And then it had an interesting message. We're working with President Trump to work on a solution. Kind of a terrifying thing to write since he wasn't president yet, but I digress. Anyway, so TikTok briefly shut down on January 18th, only to come back about 14 hours later on the 19th, after receiving assurances from then President-elect Trump that the platform would be able to continue operating notwithstanding the law. On January 20th, after Trump was inaugurated, he signed an executive order directing the Attorney General not to enforce the law for 75 days, during which time the president would work on a solution with TikTok long-term. And that's where we are now, where TikTok is up and running, and we don't know for at least 75 more days. We don't know what the long-term outcome is going to be. One proposal on the table is that there might be a joint venture solution that would give a U.S. entity 50% of the company, but I don't know what's going to happen. Have you heard anything?
So I actually think that this is on a very, very typical and sensible glide path that you see in antitrust law when companies are enjoined from operating or they're compelled to sell a division or whatever. Whether you hate Donald Trump or you like Donald Trump, and we can suffice it to say there are people in America who hate him and people in America who like him and everything in between. One thing he knows how to do is exploit a situation when he's got leverage. And right now he has the Supreme Court and everything behind him, and he's bending TikTok over and spanking him. And so what he's saying is, you're worthless unless I cut a deal with you. He recognizes that there's a lot of legitimate commercial activity on TikTok, that it's important. He doesn't want it to go away. But he also recognizes, and I have friends, who claim, and everybody claims they know something, who claim that the national security threats embedded in the modality of TikTok are serious and really bad. So let's take that for its face and say, okay, we accept that at some level, maybe TikTok needs to be either regulated, banned, or something. So Trump gets that. And what he's saying is, let's do a joint venture. And in terms of the corporate governance of TikTok, we'll have representatives from the United States government, which will, quote unquote, police the national security element, but otherwise, make sure it's an open and free platform. I'm sure people who don't like Trump are thinking, well, he just wants to control it with his oligarch buddies. But let's just put that aside for the moment. This is a very sensible glide path that we're on. TikTok is important, even though it is a national security threat, or so we're told. And let's say we believe it for the purposes of this discussion. It's really important. A lot of people make their living off of TikTok. It's an important social media platform for artists and for others. So it makes bucket loads of sense to do a joint venture where it can be policed if indeed it's a threat, and that'll be a matter of corporate governance and certain inspection rights and things like that, and access to its code and access to its to all kinds of of its AI processes and things like that. And this happens frankly all the time. There's nothing that novel about this. It's definitely going to happen. Trump's saying, I'm going to spank you. I have all the leverage. I'll cut a deal with you. And Trump's an economic animal. Okay. So he's saying, if I can get some money out of this for the United States, make one of my billionaire buddies happy, and keep this important commercial mechanism around, I'm going to do it. So as maniacal and wacky as he can be sometimes, he's actually, when it comes to proposing a joint venture, probably doing what many of us would do, exploiting his leverage and trying to come up with a sensible solution that does not sort of arbitrarily and maybe even capriciously completely eliminate such an important social media ecosystem. You get my drift? You see what I'm trying to say?
I do. To me, it's amazing that, because to the extent that we find ourselves, that we deem this to be kind of a difficult situation for TikTok, and and you're quick to sort of identify Trump's adept ability to exploit a situation. This is also a situation of Trump's making. He was the one who originally said, I have concerns about this platform. We should shut it down. Yeah. It went from that to Congress, a Republican in Congress creating a bill that got enough Democratic support to get over the top. And then a Democrat signs it into law. And then Trump now saves it, even though it was his idea in the first place. And somehow, and now, like, if you were to ask most Americans, like, whose fault is it that TikTok even went away in the first place? They're going to be like, oh yeah, it was Joe Biden. He's the one who signed the bill into law. That's amazing.
I don't disagree with you. It reminds me of that last scene in the movie Wall Street, where Michael Douglas meets Charlie Sheen in the middle of Central Park and punches him, and he falls on the ground, and then he's bleeding from his nose, and then he helps him up and gives him a handkerchief. So it's the ultimate control to punch someone and then give them a handkerchief so they don't bleed out. And so that's a very, very powerful tactic. It's something Trump is good at. On the other hand, in fairness, I have spoken to people who claim they're super connected to national security, and they have told me that some of the shenanigans that are being pulled on TikTok are a genuine threat to our society. So putting aside the sort of circus act / strategically brilliant maneuvering of Donald Trump, and there's sort of a mixture of both in everything that he does, in my view, there probably is some legitimate, appreciable national security threat. So if there is, and simultaneously, we don't want to lose out on an important commercial presence in the United States, particularly for artists in light of this show, whether you like him or you don't like him, some form of joint venture with a carefully crafted governance structure, just like settlements in the antitrust world, is probably what's actually just what the doctor is ordering. But you're right, man. You can punch someone in the face and they're bleeding, and then you give them a handkerchief and you stitch them up and give them 5 stitches. You're in ultimate control if you can knock someone out and then revive them. Well,
I don't doubt you when you say that you think that there is a path to a sale here. Like, this is your world, but
a joint venture.
A joint venture. Well, that's puzzling as well, because the law says they have to divest. If a joint venture means like they still get to own half of it, how does that comply with the law? I don't know, unless they're going to redo the law.
Because a divestiture, okay, and there's lots of precedents for this, a divestiture is not just an economic concept. For example, you can sell a big piece of a media company. You can still own a huge economic stake, but if you've lost your voting control, then then someone else has supermajority voting control. You still have an economic stake. So the concept of a divestiture is not a literal and linear concept. It's a concept that accommodates a lot of different corporate finance or a lot of different governance structures. That's what's really at work here. And listen, one thing I've learned is the United States government, whether it's being run by Democrats, Republicans, or a mix, can quite literally do whatever the hell it wants. I've learned that in biotech. I've learned that in tech. I've been burned by that. I've been helped by it. The United States government will and can do whatever it wants. And so whether Gideon and Ryan don't think this falls under the even a broad definition of divestiture, they literally don't give a crap. They're going to do whatever they want that they think is best politically and hopefully best for the country, although the latter may be secondary given how most of our politicians act these days.
Well, I guess the other thought I have in my head, though, is, I mean, again, I don't doubt you when you say like you think there's a path to a joint venture here. But I mean, when I think about like the idea that like TikTok and ByteDance, I should say, had 9 months to make a sale happen, and they couldn't make a sale happen in 9 months because like putting a 9-month clock on a sale is going to depress the value of what your company's worth. Wouldn't putting a 75-day clock make the value even less? Like why? Like what? Like they should have even less of an incentive to want to move forward with a sale, knowing like how much cheaply you'd have to sell it for now because there's that sword hanging over your head.
Yeah, it's hard to know whether the chilling effect on value, which is what you're referring to, is made worse by a longer duration period before they have to act, or made better. The idea is when you there's a decree to shut someone down or enjoin them, unless they're literally killing people on the streets, is to let some kind of considered outcome play out. And that ain't going to happen in 75 days. And often, in my experience, negotiations like this, they sort of have this long kind of tail, and then it all, everybody sees the whites of everybody's eyes because Trump he doesn't want to lose TikTok. He acts like he has the leverage and he's spanking them, but he doesn't want to lose it. Trump is an economic animal. All he cares about is who pays for what, the Panama Canal and all this stuff. He's actually a hammer, and he sees only nails when it comes to economics and who contributes things. So I think Trump thinks to himself, I can make this thing worth billions. We can own half. We can police it. Boom, it's another good deal I did. And so, that's Trump's sort of reduction ad absurdum prism through which he views the world.
He can hand it off to one of his oligarch buddies.
Yeah. And by the way, sometimes it's very helpful, and sometimes it's productive, and sometimes it's just linear and childish, but that's just, the complexity of human beings. But yeah, it's hard to know if that long sort of weird sort of white space period was bad, good, whether it in the end will be productive. It's hard to know, man. I've seen those kind of things go both ways, and it's just hard to know. It's just really, really difficult to figure that out.
And meanwhile, the livelihoods and prospects of a lot of independent creators hang in the balance. A lot of folks who are dependent on this platform for promoting themselves or even directly making money for themselves. And now it's all just sort of subject to the political whims of a president and a few very powerful billionaires. And, all in the name of what's supposed to be national security. But as I said 9 months ago with this legislation, if you think there is a national security issue from the way that TikTok is doing its business, the real solution is to create legislation that addresses whatever that specific thing is that entity is doing, not just to target one entity that these people are dependent on and shut that entity down. Like, do the real work, do the real legislating and regulating. Don't just go after one company that a lot of people depend on, because now you end up with situations like this where this company is in limbo, as are a bunch of artists.
See, I respectfully disagree with that, and I know we don't have much time left, but
you always respectfully disagree right when we're up against the break.
Yeah, exactly. I'll respectfully disagree in about 5 seconds. Legislation is a kind of abstract set of guideposts that people bend to their will. Governance is real. And so if you have, So if you know it's illegal to drive 60 while you're drunk, you might get drunk and drive 60. But if there's a policeman in your car with you, okay, you're not going to drive 60 and you might not drive drunk. You might even get there. So governance is what matters. And legislation is just sort of like this abstract third party guidepost that's kind of a joke in the real world, in my view. So what we're talking about, and what I think this joint venture will look like if it comes to pass, is an actual structure of governance no different than when the Justice Department or DOJ says to Ryan, you know what, you can merge with this business, but we're going to be on the board and we're going to make sure you don't collude to raise prices. So you're going to need mommy and daddy home if this business is to exist, to make sure the shenanigans apparently are national security threats don't go on. No legislation is going to save us from anything. Legislation just doesn't get it done, man. So that's where I respectfully disagree.
Except this doesn't get it done either, because whatever evil that we think this company was doing, of course, we don't know what this evil is because it's all, state secrets, national security and all that. That evil still exists and is unregulated. And the next ByteDance could come out and do the same thing. What I am saying is I agree with you in that the law should be a law that says you can't drive over 60. What Congress is trying to do is identify one guy in town who's driving 70 miles an hour and taking away his driver's license. Meanwhile, the roads are still dangerous.
Yeah, well, it's up to the geniuses that we have on both sides of the aisle in our government to figure this out. So you can rest assured.
I feel confident that
you can rest assured that whether it's Donald Trump or Joe Biden or JD Vance or Ocasio-Cortez, they're going to get it right. These are truly brilliant statesmen, just like Winston Churchill. No worries, buddy. We're good.
Problem solved. I'm not worried one bit.
It's cool.
On that positive note, let's take a quick break. We're going to be joined by our guest, Tim Walther of All Good Presents, here on Break the Business.
Break the Business is presented in cooperation with Ryan A. Kairalla, PA. Ryan A. Kairalla, PA is a law firm providing transactional entertainment legal services, including contracts, business formation, commercial law, copyright, trademark, and more. Ryan A. Kairalla, PA, Miami, Florida. rkpalaw.com.
Streaming services for Break the Business provided by LEK Entertainment. LEK Entertainment is a full-service entertainment company offering everything from consultations to full-scale events and productions, including audio and video productions, voiceovers, staged theatrical productions, script and music development, and streaming services. For more information, visit lekentertainment.com. LEK Entertainment wants to help you bring your story to life.
Thanks for supporting Break the Business. If you have a question or topic that you want us to discuss, email us at breakthebusiness@gmail.com. You can follow the host, that's me, on Twitter at Ryan Kair, and you can follow the show at the BTB Podcast. Be sure to subscribe to the show on Twitch, YouTube, and Facebook, and on all major podcast platforms. And now, let's get back to the show.
Thanks, me. Welcome back to Break the Business, everybody. Ryan Kairalla here with Gideon King, having an absolute blast. And, digging into some really good, politics. I feel like people are going to get a political science minor just from watching or listening to this episode of Break the Business, Gideon. I always feel a lot more sophisticated after shows that I do with you. Some of the other co-hosts, I feel like we get a little goofy, drift too much into the pop culture. I feel like, you and I, we tackle the serious topics here.
So what you're saying is I'm a boring person. I totally get it, Ryan.
I was trying to be diplomatic about it.
I hear where you're coming from. That's cool, buddy. That's cool.
No, not at all. This stuff is really, really stirring to me and definitely has implications for the creators out there. And a lot of what we're talking about is stuff that I'm hearing from my clients, especially the ones that work heavily in TikTok. They're really worried about this stuff, Gideon.
And listen, it's also just super lightning fast. It's also terrifying when the government sticks its big knuckles into the private sector. I've seen it a million times. And, I trust, this is me speaking, I trust the private sector more than I trust the government. So anytime the government mandates, and the government was trying to shut Microsoft down and say you have this thing that nobody can replicate, literally right in the middle of that lawsuit, you could go get basically everything you could get Microsoft Windows from Google. And it was like, why are they even doing this? So to be honest, whenever the government gets involved and starts telling people to open things or shut things down and so on, you're in a bad a political, socioeconomic, and cultural neighborhood.
Well, I certainly feel that way that you do when it's anytime it's involving a platform in which speech takes place. Right?
Oh yeah.
When the government, it's one thing when the government regulates the economy, depending on what your politics are, you're either okay or less okay with that. But when the government is getting involved in the town square,
oh yeah, man,
is getting involved in a place where people communicate, where they share art with each other, terrifying, and a lot of bad stuff can happen.
Called Hugo Chavez in Venezuela or Fidel Castro in Cuba, for sure, man.
All right, man. On that happy note, let's go ahead and bring out our guest this week.
Tim Walther rolls into town, found the groove with equal sound. All good now's where joy abounds, festival that shakes the ground. He's here to break the business with a spark, no one can miss this. Lights and music, heart, pure bliss. Tim Walther's here, let's start the hit list.
Our guest this week is the founder of All Good Presents, a leading Mid-Atlantic concert promoter and festival producer. Recently, All Good Presents announced the launch of the All Good Now Music Festival, a reimagining of the All Good Music Jam Band festivals of the 90s and early 2000s. All Good Now is set for June 14th and 15th at the Meriwether Post Pavilion in Maryland. And you can find out more about our guest's work by visiting allgoodpresentslivemusic.com. We are happy to welcome Tim Walther on to Break the Business.
Hi, guys.
Hello, sir. Tim, you have seen it all in the festival world. And I imagine I can look to you as something of a historian of the genre and specifically of the All Good Music Festival, which really does have a special place in the jam band tradition. Can you talk a little bit about the role that the All Good Music Festival played historically in the evolution of jam band culture?
Yeah, we were pretty much there at the beginning. I would say 1997 was the first All Good Music Festival. 1998 was when Dean Budnick started jambands.com and wrote the book Jam Bands. So basically, we were right before the cusp of the jam band even having a term to it. And, for me, I was touring with the Grateful Dead for a number of years, and Jerry passed away, and myself and hundreds of thousands of other people were looking for something to do, looking for somewhere to put our love and our community and our music. And, I got inspired. I read a book, Bill Graham Presents, and I got inspired to be a promoter. I started on the streets. I started handing out flyers for different bands for $25, for free tickets, for a case of beer, just doing whatever I could to interact with the bands to help them build their situations on a street level, that kind of thing. After I did that for a couple of years, I'm at Wilmer's Park in Brandywine, Maryland, where I'm at other people's festivals. I'm like, I feel like I could do this better than you guys. I've got relationships with all these bands. Hey, Mr. Wilmer, owner of the park, can I do this festival here next year? And, that's where it all started. So basically the first All Good Festival was for 950 people. And I was basically throwing a big party for my friends, not really having any background or any schooling, of how to survive in the music industry, let alone get started. So that's where it started. And then I went 17 years from 950 people to 23,000, slow growth. And the story goes.
And now you're relaunching All Good Now. It took something of a hiatus, for about 20 years now. Talk about what inspired you to want to bring it back, and how are you going to find the balance with this festival, sort of paying homage to the original festival while incorporating some new elements?
Well, I tell you, it broke my heart as much as it broke anybody's heart when, I peaked at year 15. Year 16, I went peaked at year 14. Year 15, I went down. Year 16, I went down. Year 17 almost put me out of business, because I just had to hold on. I just had to make that festival work. It was my baby. I didn't want to let it go. If I could go back now, I'm going to have to live again to have the situation come up again, I think. Hopefully it won't happen again. But, I should have got out 3 years sooner. I had William Morris basically saying they wanted to invest in me. I was like, I was too proud. It was my festival. And I went down, crashed and burned. And honestly, it crushed my spirit. I went about the rest of my world. I managed Dark Star Orchestra. I've managed them for 17 years now. I focused on building that band as a manager. I do about 100 club shows a year. I focused on my club business. Didn't really focus on doing another festival for 3 years, and I started the 4848 Music Festival as a snowshoe mountain resort festival in Snowshoe, West Virginia. But I wanted to start back small, 23,000 down to 16,000, down to 12,000, down to 9,000. That's where All Good Festival left off. 4848 started at 3,000. So I've been building that for 5 or 6 years. It's more of a boutique festival. I do another boutique festival, Dark Star Jubilee, which is also about 3,000 people a year. It's a 3-day camp out with Grateful Dead heads and Grateful Dead and assimilated music. I wasn't sure if I'd ever bring All Good back. It wasn't my intention necessarily. I would only bring it back if it made absolutely perfect sense. And
so what made this make sense?
Well, my business has been growing on the club level here in Baltimore and DC. I'm doing, having done Billy String, I do about 10 shows a year at the Anthem at 6,000 capacity. Those are the biggest indoor shows I've ever done. So I've been doing a little bit more of those each year. There's some bands in the scene like Billy Strings and Goose that have broken the envelope of what jam bands typically do. Jam bands tend to get caught up in the 1,000 to 2,000 person level, and they stay there for the rest of their lives. These guys broke out. They're paving a path for the growth of the jam band music scene. And, I got a really good relationship with Goose. I've done every show with them in the market. I felt like I had a good anchor. It's a good time for them. It was the right time for them. It was the right time for some of these other bands. It was the right time for the jam band scene. I've done 46 campouts festivals, and I've done like 65 festivals altogether. And the campout festival, as we knew it, is done and gone. There's a few campout festivals remaining. I have one of them at 3,000, but it's not, there's not 20,000 person jam band campout festivals anymore. Just Fish can do one couple days a year, and that's about it. So I've got a really good partnership with IMP, IMP being one of the strongest promoters in the country that operates Meriwether Post, the Anthem 930 Club, the Atlantis, all that kind of thing. So going into this with him, just being the venue and marketing the festival as a partner is a really big strength in what we're going to do. And my goal is for the All Good Now to be the number one jam band festival in the country as it relates to doing it in a shed setting. And right now I feel like I'm on a path to do that.
Well, it sounds like partnerships can play a key role in what brings these festivals back. One of the things that Gideon and I were talking about in the prior segment, because both he and I, we have a little bit of experience in the festival space, Gideon more than I. And one of the things we were just marveling at are how people in your line of work do it. Because when either of us have gotten into the festival business, the first thing we concluded was, man, it just seems so hard to make the numbers work, to make the logistics happen, to like manage the liability. What are some of the lessons you've learned in that regard that, feel like give you an edge in making these festivals so successful?
Well, I have a couple of advantages. One is that I started from the very bottom. I started with flyers in my hand, and I built my festival or built my business from there. So when I did, like I said, I started at 940 people. So at that level, I was making money on my first festival. The bands were basically like, well, you can pay us such and such if you do so many tickets. It was a co-op festival basically with the bands that I'd worked hard for a couple of years on the streets. And I never wanted to go to. I wanted to do 3,000. When I was at 3,000, I didn't want to go for 10,000. I wanted to get it to 5,000. I wanted to get to 8,000. I wanted to get to 10,000. I wanted to get to 13,000. So the infrastructure and the personnel are growing and building, and the ticket prices are going up slightly, and that's helping. And you're getting a price. You're getting fair prices on the bands because you have the festival that bands want to play, and you're getting fair bands on the personnel because you have the festival that the personnel. You have the company that the personnel want to work for. I have a lot of loyal folks that want to work for me at my festival. I have folks that have been working with me for 20 years. And I got a lot of folks that go back and forth from work with us and work with others and that kind of thing. And I may have gotten lost. I don't know if I'm answering your question. If you can remind me your specific question, I don't want to play politics here.
just interested in hearing your perspective on managing festivals effectively, particularly because, as Gideon and I noted in the prior segment, I feel like it's had to have gotten harder in recent years. Post-COVID, as Gideon noted, like people are drinking less at concerts than they've ever had before. Obviously budgets are tighter than they've ever been. It's a pretty challenging time to be in the live business. And that isn't to say that there aren't opportunities there, but it does take a pretty savvy promoter to make it happen. What's your perspective on that?
It's definitely a tough scene. Festivals are falling off the map left and right, as I'm sure Gideon can tell you. I wouldn't want to be a young promoter trying to launch a festival or make a festival work. I see a lot of young guys try to step up the plate and do something and just, beats them down or they're one and done kind of thing. I feel very fortunate that I believe that the 3 festivals I have this year will all 3 be successful. And, out of 67 festivals I've ever done, I've made money on 58 of them. So I'm very, it's just me. It's not like I'm not a big corporation. I don't have a lot of people working for me. I work very carefully and slowly and intently. And, I waited 3 years to throw another festival. I waited 10 years to throw the next All Good Now festival because I had to, if it was going to happen, it had to be the right time. And, again, back to All Good Now, it's just the right time. The people that used to go and camp out, they don't want to camp. They don't want to set up their tent and camp on the ground and stay out there take 4 or 5 nights out of their life to go camp in West Virginia. They want to get a hotel, drive 5 minutes, go to the show, do 10 hours at the shed, go home, come back. That's a much easier experience for them than, folks just don't, post-COVID, it seems like people want to be closer to home.
So I was going to bring up something, Tim. I did a festival called Tailgate Fest, and we got a lot of people. It was like 10,000, the first year. The talent and the cost of the talent made it so that we had to project such high numbers that's what hurt us. In fairness, it was COVID too that really smoked us.
Right.
It was a great idea, tailgating, and so on, and we had some great acts, but I think we paid too much for the acts, and actually we emphasized sort of big star quality too much, and there were a lot of mid-level bands that could have drawn people. But as I'm just sharing that, with you, I've been involved in some other ones which have been more successful. The thing that you talked about before that is kind of close to my heart as a guy that's been playing guitar since I was 7. You mentioned Billy Strings before. And the thing I would just say to Ryan and Tim and everybody is there's a thirst out there. People may not be drinking as much, but there's a thirst out there for some musicianship. And Billy Strings is like really important to me, and here's why. I'm not even saying I like or don't like his music. It has nothing to do with that. I grew up, as Ryan knows, on Steely Dan. Okay, Steely Dan was
there. It is
favorite bands of all time. And Billy Strings can play, man. He knows he warms up. The thing he uses to warm up is just, Charlie Parker song. And so I do think, and I wonder what you think about this, Tim. I just played a show the other day and people are just coming out in droves like they've never done before. They love it when we jam out. Everybody says play more solos, do more. And so I do think there's this energy now where people are like, for the love of God, I just want to see some people who actually play their instruments again. And it's cool to see Tedeschi
Right.
Trucks or Government Mule or Billy Strings or Stephen Wilson Jr. is another guy that that guy who's a pretty good nylon string guitar player. And so when you mentioned Billy Strings, I'm like, someone can actually play, and he's cool and he's unpretentious and he's not up there with tracks and a laptop. And I got to tell you, maybe it's just people who are 35 to 50. I don't know. But I think there's a new fascination again, which is some kind of a backlash with playing real instruments and real groups jamming. So I'm curious.
Let's hope so.
I'm curious if any of that plays a part in you being willing to go into the holy hell of running festivals again.
Absolutely. I mean, like I said, Billy Strings and Goose, they also like to jam. Both of those acts interface very well with their fan base. They do a Nugs recording every night, so they're streaming every night.
Yeah,
they're talking to their fans. They're social posting. They're doing quirky things on the side every day, posting online. Goose and Billy Strings both grew during COVID because they were so interactive with their fan base and playing for them across the internet from their homes and stuff, and just really, giving them something to hold on to. And my campaign right now this year, going into All Good Now and all my festivals, is I just want to give as much love as I can to the fans, and as much get away from any nonsense. And I'm not really trying to sell tickets, honestly. I'm trying to sell love, a good time, community, kindness. We're in this together. Bring it on. Let's have fun. If they want to come, they're going to buy the tickets. I just want to, I really feel that way. I'm hanging out with my friends. I want our friends to have a good time.
Are you going far and wide musically? And I guess what I mean by that now is you can go to a country music festival, okay, and one of the big acts can be a hip hop act. And so the world has changed. So sure, Billy Strings, sure, Tedeschi Trucks, sure, I don't know, Stephen Wilson Jr., sure, the Wood Brothers. I can see all that, right? But the question for you is, are you going wide and saying, yeah, Snarky Puppy too? Okay. Or are you staying in a lane and saying, no, this is a world, this is a particular musical ecosystem, that we live in, and we're going to stay pretty narrow. Almost you go to jazz festivals now, it's almost no straight ahead jazz, right? I played at the Rochester Jazz Festival this summer, and then I'm playing next summer, I'm playing at a few other ones. And it's man, we're like a rock jazz act, almost like Steely Dan again.
Sure.
We ain't a jazz act. So what are you doing musically? How wide a tent are you building? I'm curious just to hear.
Producer Lauren, let's make a note that we need to create some kind of sound that goes off every time Gideon King makes a Steely Dan reference on your show.
I feel like you can have a counter in the corner of the screen.
I like this. He can't help himself.
You guys can make fun of me all you want. I'm here trying to talk to Tim, doing my job on the show. That's all.
Sorry, go ahead, Tim.
To answer your question, I'm unlike most promoters because I have stayed in pretty much a similar lane my whole career.
Right.
From 1996 till now. I don't want to be coined the jam band promoter, but guess what? I'm the jam band promoter.
Yeah.
And I want to break out, like I'm working with Lawrence and Corey Wong and Lake Street Dive. I really am attracted to this funky jazz, soul,
right.
More mainstream type of acts, Alan Stone I've got on my festival, and the Dip, and I'm really going into that kind of group. But I feel like that's just kind of on the peripheral of the jam band scene. And earlier in my career, I was all about staying in my lane, because when I get out of my lane, I get my ass kicked. I have to come back into my lane to keep the thing rolling. Yeah. And in this marketplace, I'm in the Baltimore DC marketplace. I don't own any venues. I work in like 10 venues,
Yeah.
and I am the guy who brings all the jam into all those venues. And since I've been doing that for 25 years, that's where I'm at. Like they have relationships and history with all these other genres of acts. And I've been very fortunate for the ups and downs of the scene for 25, 30 years. There's always been something there. And it's been a little low in the last year and a half, but it feels like it's about to start growing again.
Right.
It also tends to grow some when it gets crazy in Washington.
Right. Yeah, I hear that. I believe you.
If there was ever a time for us to listen to a band that plays a song for 38 minutes, it's right now in this political environment. That's what we need now more than ever, Tim.
Exactly.
One of the things that you're doing with this festival, I think, is a pretty cool promotional technique, is creating pre-parties around the area to boost publicity for the event. What gave you that idea?
Well, I'm really trying to. This is 30 years of All Good Presents, so it's everything's coming together in my world right now. Like, it doesn't usually happen 3 things at once, but it's 30 years of All Good Presents. It's All Good Now coming back. The 3 festivals I'm doing, I'm about to launch them as a trifesta. They've all been announced already, but I'm going to put in my group. I'm going to let everybody be aware that the All Good Trifesta, that all this is coming from the same world, the same promoter. People go to these festivals, they have no idea that the same. Why does this feel like that festival? It's because the same promoter, but they don't know that. So I'm going to let them know through promotion. And, I'm just, I feel very privileged and fortunate to be in a place that feels really good right now. I just, I live on the Pulse, and the Pulse feels good. And I think we're going to have a really successful summer. And my soul is healing by the fact that the term all good is on a festival. And I get to forget about, after I do 15,000 people in Meriwether Post for 2 days in June, I get to forget about, my festival falling apart in 2015. And my soul will be healed moving forward, and it doesn't get any better than that.
Man, I sympathize with where you're coming from. There's certain things that I've built over the years, and like, they go well, and when they fall apart, it's a feeling in your stomach, and it's a physical illness. It is for me. It's not the fucking money. It's not the money. It's not. It's just like it's like you grieve, and you feel as if you've had a loss. Like you literally grieve. I mean, I walk around with something that I've worked on for years. I'm thinking of one that's happening right now, and it's very painful. And it's like, man, it's just got me like almost like physically sick all the time. And it's just, I hear where you're coming from. I can only imagine you're watching the numbers drop. Why are they dropping? What's the cause? And it's like, do you stay with it? Don't you? And it's like, it never just, the answer doesn't come down to you from God. And they say, well, shut it down today, January 5th, make a decision to stop the all good. No, it's like this melting ice cube to the point where you like can't, you just almost just, it just finally breaks you. And you give up. But dude, it's painful. It's hard. I've been there. I mean, it's really hard.
It's really hard. It's like somebody died in my family.
Exactly. It's a loss. And that's what people don't realize. It's like, it's literally like you grieve like it's a loss. No doubt about it.
Right. I didn't know how sorry.
No, I was just saying, we got to do a better job hyping Tim up here. All right. He's got the concert of his life coming up in 5 months, and you're scaring the heck out of him. All right, Tim, you're going to crush it with this festival. It's going to be amazing. You're bringing back all good. We need jam bands again. You're absolutely going to crush this thing, my friend.
It's the opposite. When someone cares that much that they grieve, that's when things are successful.
There we go.
That's the actual point I'm trying to make. Look at Steely Dan. Just kidding.
So Gideon's right on my wavelength. I got no issues. Trust me.
Right. Of course he is. Our guest has been Tim Walther. He is the founder of All Good Presents, who are relaunching the All Good Now Music Festival on June 14th and 15th at the Meriwether Post Pavilion in Maryland. You can find out more about our guest's work by visiting allgoodpresentslivemusic.com. Tim, this has been awesome. I'm really rooting for your festival. I think it's going to be an absolute blast. Before we let you go, we got one last question for you.
Okay.
Do you have any last tips for the indie creators out there to help them move their careers forward? Oh yeah, take your swig.
I mean, you got to be real. You got to be honest. You got to work hard. You got to start at the beginning, you know, build relationships, one relationship at a time. You know, just, I mean, people come out and they want to be on top as soon as they step into the business. You know, you got to work hard at it. You got to build things up and go where your nose goes. You got to follow your gut.
Absolutely.
Hey, Tim, we're rooting for you, buddy. Don't be a stranger. All right. We'd love to have you on again real soon. We really appreciate your insight.
Right on. Thank you. I appreciate it, guys.
Our thanks to Tim Walther and Gideon King. Our thanks to producer Lauren. And of course, our thanks to all of you for checking out Break the Business. We'll see you next week.